Read Steve Dodge, they had put a little
stone monument.
Right. But there needs to be more than that. Clearly, I mean, if we understand, right, let's go back to the beginning of my presentation. They have this big Loyalist Memorial Garden in New Plymouth, Green Turtle Key. But really, it's a celebration of the white Loyalists. We have no statue, we have no symbol to remind us of the contributions that these black Loyalists have made to the Bahamas, and I hope I've made a case for them tonight. Anyone else?
You mentioned that you get physical looks when you mentioned black loyalists. So can you define the loyalists?
Right. Black Loyalists are enslaved and free persons of color who fight for the British during the American Revolution. And they are prompted, of course, by these British proclamations by various British generals throughout the conflict that guarantee not only their freedom, but their protection behind British lines, starting November 7th, 1775 in Virginia with Lord Dunmore, and ending in April of 1783 with Sir Guy Carleton's evacuation orders. Now let me just say, because I don't think I said this in the presentation, the initial proclamation by Dunmore was very narrow, like I said. It was only for enslaved persons who were owned by patriots. But increasingly throughout the war, General Howe and some other generals, Cornwallis for example, extend that proclamation to include women and other enslaved persons. So by the end of the war, when Sir Guy Carleton gives his evacuation orders, it now includes women and children and enslaved persons. Some maybe even have been loyalist, loyalist slave owners.
So not just of the patriots, but of the loyalists.
Right. But I will say this, there was a commissioned board in New York to test all of the various black loyalist claims even before they disembarked. And if a white loyalist brought his case before that board, in almost every instance, the person, he may or she may have been on a ship already ready to leave for Nova Scotia or the Bahamas or England. They would be taken off the ship, brought before the board, and invariably they would receive an unfavorable ruling, and it would lead to them being enslaved.
But I think the presentation is brilliant. I just want to say that the black loyalists were not completely forgotten. Some of us really at this story. We mentioned them, but honestly, we didn't really because we were, I guess, I mean, the mere fact that loyalists and their slaves, because I was told that they didn't want the word slave, but I included, black history and slave history, if that was on the other. I think was a little move forward. Yes. So I'm just trying to defend us a little, but not to say that you're wrong. I think you're very right that none else has been about black loyalists, and I'm very happy that
Let me respond to that. I'm very grateful, Gail, for you saying that. Let me say I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Gail Saunders. I wouldn't be a historian if it wasn't for the support I received from Gail. And what work I'm doing is really an extension of Gail and Michael Creighton's work. What I was trying to say is I was really more critiquing the way that loyalists are portrayed in popular culture, particularly when you have these iconic representations in communities like New Plymouth. But again, even in my presentation, you would note I had said Creighton and Saunders talking about in whose possession they are, Islands Industry Volume 1, and all of that. So I want to say that my work is both an extension of earlier scholarship, but also a challenge to a hagiographic sort of heroic narrative that does prevail in the Bahamas. We celebrate the white loyalists, it seems. We have memorial gardens, and we have some literature that speaks to their transformation, but it has obfuscated, I believe, the clear contributions that black loyalists made. So that's really what I'm doing. So I appreciate the comment.
I totally agree with you, and your building. I think it's fantastic.
But this is the
Yes.
I'm almost done, sweetie. That's my daughter. That might be a signal. You go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that not get out the board. So that they would say a sign or whatever. Instead of a sign would necessarily play with everything once they reach where they had to be under the quote a responsible person for the voice.
Well, yeah, in some instances they were in debt. So, for example, if you look at George Lyle, who goes to Jamaica, he actually sought out someone who he could be apprenticed or indentured to so that when he got to Jamaica, he wouldn't be enslaved completely or absolutely. But he expected that indenture to end. It was, there was a terminal date to that. And so that was, again, another strategy. And I will say also for the black loyalists coming from New York, many of them, sadly, and Gail, you and Michael Creighton point this out, a lot of them were assigned in whose possession they were to their former slave owner. So, I mean, the fact that the person who's in possession of them happened to be their former slave owner doesn't look too good for their aspirations to be free in the Bahamas.
One other thing, it appears that the black loyalists didn't stop at 1887. It appears that they went as far as the war of 1812. And but some, no written, but some verbal accounts from family history was linked to loyalists out of New Orleans.
There's a professor, Manny Whitfield, I think he's an associate professor at the University of Vermont, who's done a study of black loyalists in the War of 1812. And I think that's an interesting study. I was concerned when I started reading this work that maybe it would make my dissertation less original. But thankfully he's studying the War of 1812 and not the Revolutionary Wars. I was happy to know, but his work is very complementary of what I'm trying to do, but with an earlier period.
One more interesting thing to all of this. There are places in the Bahamas, Lustra and North End, Long Island, where there were also Indians brought down.
Very good point. Yeah.
And there's people from the Adley plantation area of Long Island who claim descent from Mohawks. And of course the Mohawks fought with the British and they all lost. And if they didn't get away to Canada, the ones who were too close to the frontier, they would have been killed by the American Rangers. And so they would have with the squire, or the man in whose militia they fought and helped and so forth. And so there might have been some division between runaways from enemy aliens who were the rebels, and then in the later part, master and servant and Indian scouts and everybody fighting for the army.
Right.
And that might explain the possession. It might not have all been as sinister as that, because there would have been people who came and they brought their Indians and they brought their slaves and their free blacks, because otherwise they would have just been killed or taken back into slavery in the States.
Yeah, let me make a point too. Spanish Florida, Jane Landers has done some good work on the community in St. Augustine. It offered an escape for enslaved persons from Georgia and South Carolina, and so it's sort of like the southern end of the Underground Railroad. And so I mean, you had to convert to Catholicism, by the way, to escape to Spanish Florida in order to get protection. That was the little caveat. But I think it's important to understand that you have Seminoles, you have indigenous persons, Indians, and also enslaved persons that are claiming freedom now under Spanish control. It's quite a polyglot community. St. Augustine comes before 1783, the evacuation, and again, it's turned back over to Spain until 1820 when Andrew Jackson makes it a U.S. state eventually. But I will say one last thing on that. There's also black loyalists, not black loyalists, but Indians from the Mosquito Coast who also come to the Bahamas as loyalists. They initially go to Mosquito Coast, which is now Honduras, and eventually come to the Bahamas. And there's a claim in the Negro Court brought by Mary Brown, who owns Mosquito Coast Indians. So it's fascinating because, you know, there's this myth out there also too that, you know, all the Indians died with Columbus, but it's not exactly the case. Crystal.
I want to clarify a point. The terms of the Black Loyalist transfer lie in the fact that they have to be, chaperoned by a white loyalist. Is that it? They cannot just relocate or emigrate to islands.
No, that was specific. That term, in whose possession they are, as for Black Loyalists, specifically coming out of New York City. But for the Black Loyalists that come from St. Augustine, their status is even less clear and murkier. And I think that explains why they come over a lot of times as individuals. For example, Prince Williams, who evacuates out of St. Augustine, he escapes in a dinghy with Sharper Morris. You know, and Frank Spence, again, he comes to Long Island first, and apparently he's enslaved. His wife stays in Florida. He has to purchase her freedom before she can join him in Nassau. So, you know, I think, you know, whether they come in possession of by white or whether they come by escaping from St. Augustine, there is a challenge that occurs in the Bahamas for them to gain freedom, and they can lose it and gain it and lose it again and then gain it, you know, finally. So it speaks to, like I said, the tenuous nature of their struggle. Sir Orville.
I'm relating to Mr. Davis's first remark. It's my understanding that many of the freed slaves came to the Bahamas and were freed after they came in. While they were slaves, they often adopted the name, particularly the surname of their masters. And so that a person like Cox